All right, we'd like to welcome in now the most normal coach in college basketball to Inside College Basketball Now with John Rothstein. He is Creighton head coach Greg McDermott. Mac, welcome. What's the vacation spot for the McDermotts in 2025?
There hasn't been much vacation, but I have a place down in Scottsdale, so if I can get away, that's usually the spot.
Now, 5 years ago, coaches, everybody in your vocation during COVID was talking about how the pandemic really opened up everybody's eyes to more work-life balance. 5 years later, do you think you personally have achieved that in the last half decade?
Probably not. And 5 years ago, we didn't have the transfer portal or NIL. So,
True.
so that changed our work-life balance, because April and May, once the tournament was over, there obviously you had some recruiting, but generally that was a little bit of a slower time. And now you could argue that, those last couple of weeks of March and April during the transfer portal is maybe the busiest time of the year. So things have changed a little bit, and it's impacted the calendar, I think, of Division I coaches, but that's the reality we live in.
Mac, they say the days are long, but the years are short. You got to Creighton in 2010. What has it been like for you personally, having a great seat to watch Creighton go from a school in the Missouri Valley to now a school in the Big East that's obviously a national force?
John, it's been very rewarding. And, obviously there's a lot of people that have been part of that. And, none more than important than Bruce Rasmussen, who was the athletic director when I got here and for the first 11 or 12 years. Just his vision for our program and the practice facility that we built, that we started construction on really a year and a half before there was any talk of joining the Big East. Right. So when we went into the Big East, our facilities were on par with schools at this level nationally. So, and I've had, a lot of really good assistant coaches that have worked for me that have gone on to do some really good things. So when you surround yourself with good people, all you got to do is kind of stay out of their way and not screw them up.
Well, what you really did was you made Creighton your next job so you never had to leave. In addition to joining the Big East, what other ancillary things, in addition to the practice facility, helped you make Creighton your next job?
Well, the institution and our fan base have, they've been incredibly supportive. And, we've been in the top 5 or 6 in the country in attendance really for 10 straight years. So you don't have to, you're not pounding the streets trying to generate interest in your program. There's incredible interest. Omaha's a great sports town. You watch the College World Series and you pop that on in June. And yes, we have fans from across the country that come to Omaha to watch their teams play, but over half that crowd is people from Omaha. So it's been an incredible place to live. And we have the resources necessary for us to continue to put a good product on the floor. And, I think sometimes, there's a lot of question marks when you look at other jobs. You think, but you don't exactly know. And, every job has its positives and every job has some challenges. And there are far more positives here at Creighton than there are challenges.
And obviously, when you put a great product on the floor, people take notice. I know that 8 years ago, Ohio State came calling for you in 2017, and you opted to stay. Was there any other opportunity during your tenure at Creighton that you really took a hard look at?
I think my agent always gets a few calls, and that's normal. But there's really nothing that I've come even close to the finish line. Ohio State at that time was as close as it ever was. But I have no regrets. I'm obviously, I've been very happy here, and now we have a succession plan in place. So hopefully this can continue to go on for a long time after I'm gone.
So you referenced the succession plan. Alain Huss, your former assistant, guy who did a great job at High Point, is going to succeed you whenever you're done coaching at Creighton. Why was it so important for you to have that head coach in waiting in place?
Well, I think you look across the country and Darren DeVries obviously worked for me for a long time and is a good friend. And, he takes the Indiana job, which is, one of the better jobs in the country. And 4 days after he takes the job, he doesn't have a roster. Everybody's gone. And, you work hard to develop a culture, and I think culture is still important. I think it's more challenging to hold on to that culture in the current environment. And when the time comes that I decide to step aside, I don't want that to go away, because this program is really important to me. And I always have wanted one of my guys to replace me if that was possible. And obviously D-Rock got the Indiana job, so he was probably off the market. So Coach Huss and I had some conversations, and fortunately the university got on board with that. And he's a terrific coach, was a great assistant coach during his time with me. And obviously what he did at High Point speaks for himself. And I think he'll be able to do that here at Creighton when that time comes.
And he's coming back after being a head coach, and obviously people at Creighton want you to coach as long as you want to, but do you have a time frame or a window where you think you're going to wrap up your career?
Sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. I don't know when it will be, when it feels like it's time. But obviously I have, I owe it to Al to make sure it's a good situation when he takes it over. So, he was involved in a lot of the decisions when he was here as an assistant coach on a daily basis, and obviously we'll continue to work hand in hand with every decision we make with the program.
Well, and Alain Huss is one part of what has become just an unbelievable coaching tree under you. I want to make sure I don't leave anybody out, but Ryan Miller at Murray State, Steve Lutz at Oklahoma State, TJ Otzelberger at Iowa State, Darren DeVries at Indiana, Ben Jacobson at Northern Iowa. The list is as impressive as any coaching tree now in college basketball. I'm curious, how does the success of your pupils compare internally to how you feel when individually you have obviously success with your own program?
Yeah, and Danielle Robinson is at North Texas now, Eric Henderson at Drake, Brent Peterson at South Dakota State. So there's a few. But I try to empower those guys when they're here. I give them a lot of responsibility. And their voice is heard in every meeting every single day, and they have a voice in practice. And especially in the summertime, 8 to 10 years ago, I went to kind of allowing assistants to kind of run the summer, and I act more kind of in a cheerleading role on the sideline, pulling guys aside. I think it's really important that your team learns to respect the assistant coach's voice, and that they're really important to the success of our program. I also think it's very difficult to listen to the same voice for 10 or 12 months a year and have that voice be impactful. So number one, I think I've hired the right people. Number two, I've let them kind of grow and make some mistakes on their own, and be able to run a practice, be able to interact and have their opinions heard on really everything that we deal with in the program. And I know some head coaches are, they're hands-on all the time, and they micromanage and they want to control every part of the program. I've never been that way. I want these guys to be strongly involved in every decision we make.
Well, obviously the strength of your coaching tree is something that puts a smile on your face and is always going to put a smile on your face. Waking up and realizing that Ryan Kalkbrenner is not going to anchor your defense anymore after 5 years is not going to put a smile on your face. What is it like now as a coach after having that backbone defensively to move forward without him in the pivot?
Yeah, I mean, obviously 5 years with him is would be any coach's dream, and to watch where he started and where he finished, not just on the floor, but off the floor. His, Mitch Ballack and I, who's on my staff now, were just talking a couple days ago about, his growth during that 5-year period as a person, as a leader, and clearly as a player has been really fun to sit back and watch. But, he's one of the best defenders at the rim that there was in the college game. And, you're seeing a little bit of that in the NBA Summer League, the impact that he had. I know he had a game-winning block the other day as the time ran out. But we're going to have to change what we do defensively. We're going to have to be, a little bit more creative with what we do in ball screen coverages. The drop coverage will still be part of what we do, but probably not as much as it's been in the past because Ryan was elite. But, it's those days are over, I think, where you have a guy come and, play 5 years and do what he did. And he's one of the best players to ever wear a Creighton uniform.
Mac, what are your thoughts on the roster you've put together entering the season?
Yeah, really excited. I think we were able to find the right people in the transfer portal. Obviously, we had ideas of what we needed from a skill set standpoint, but they're really meshing together well. And getting Fedor back was huge. I think we were finally able to see what he was capable of late in the season last year. But Josh Dick's coming from Iowa, fits us perfectly. Owen Freeman will give us someone that can really score on the block and do a lot of different things. And Austin Schwartz, Blake Harper, Nick Graves at the point. And, Ty Davis has made great strides from a year ago, and then you have Jason Green, Isaac Trout, and Jackson McAndrew. Jackson finished the year great and has added 10 pounds of muscle and is playing at a very high level. And I think he's an NBA player probably sooner than later. So I like the makeup of the team. It's going to be a different team. That's what makes it fun. But we'll hook it up and see what happens.
Now, you mentioned a number of players, obviously, who are incoming this year as newcomers. I'm curious, though, which of the returning players that were on Creighton's roster last year do you think will make the biggest jump?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ty Davis has at the point, certainly. His leadership is incredible, and, you want that out of a point guard. And, we lost a lot with Stephen Ashworth and what he brought from a leadership standpoint on a daily basis, but they've all improved. Isaac Trout's shooting the leather off the basketball, and Jason Green is really stepped into the leadership role that we need him to play, having this being his fourth year in our program. And and as I mentioned, Jackson's gotten better. So those are really important people for us, because to maintain culture, you have to have some guys that have learned and they return, and now they're passing, this is what's acceptable and not acceptable in the Creighton program to the new guys. And, those guys have done an unbelievable job of that. And, I think that poises us for a good year.
Owen Freeman missed the latter part of last season due to an injury. Is he cleared and full go?
Yeah, he was. He's dealing with a little bit of a knee issue right now that's going to keep him out probably another month to 6 weeks. But he was in the first 2 or 3 weeks of our workout and looked good. And I think he's going to fit great in our 5-out offense. His ability to pass the basketball and take some guys off the dribble from the top of the floor. But he's really skilled back to the basket, and that's just not something that many people do anymore. But he's very talented. I remember, Coach McCaffrey brought his team over here in the Big Ten Big East Challenge a couple of years ago when Owen was a freshman. And I remember telling my staff after that game how impressed I was with him and how good a player I thought he was going to be. And to get him and Josh to come over here, obviously it's home for Josh being from right across the river in Council Bluffs. But those two have played a lot of college basketball at a high level. They were really well coached by Coach McCaffrey, and now they're going to do their thing in Omaha.
Okay, and just to follow up, Freeman is expected to be ready for the start of practice. It's not a long-term thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
All right, this next topic I talk to you about every year at this time, because I was looking at what you've put together non-conference: at Gonzaga, at Nebraska at Pinnacle Bank, K-State at home, 3 in the Players era. Baylor and Iowa State are guaranteed in Vegas. That's 26 high major games. I mean, it feels like every year I ask you, is this the toughest non-conference schedule that you've played? How much more daunting is this, though, when you don't have a Kalkbrenner or a player that has been through, obviously, a deep run as an all-league guy?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's challenging when you don't have as many guys back. But I've always believed that I would rather play a good schedule, and maybe it doesn't go as well as you think, but then not challenge your team and not give your team the opportunities, and then you get to March, and all of a sudden you're left out of the tournament, or your seed is hurt because you didn't play anybody. So I still think it matters. I would say last year I didn't necessarily believe that the selection committee rewarded teams that played a strong non-conference schedule for games that we're in charge of. Everybody's got the challenges and maybe an exempt event, but we decided to start a home and home with Gonzaga and a home and home with K-State after finishing one with Alabama. So we're going to play good teams. I think that prepares you for Big East play, and we've been pretty successful in the Big East the last 8 or 9 years, and I think in large part that has to do with us challenging ourselves and answering a lot of questions in the non-conference portion of your schedule.
And you now have been the dean of this conference because you were there at the start during this new rendition of the Big East, and you have seen obviously everything really come to fruition. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, getting ready to play, at least on paper, St. John's and UConn this season, what do you anticipate during those 4 games?
Yeah, obviously they're really, really talented, and Coach Cooley's been in the league as long as I have, although he's switched jobs. But somebody sent me a photo. It was from 4 years ago or 5 years ago of the Big East Media Day, and the only 2 people in the same job were Val Ackerman and myself. So that's, at least I survived it. But yeah, they hit a home run in the portal, and obviously Coach Hurley's returned some pretty good pieces as well. But they're really, really talented. They're hard places to play. But our place is a hard place to play as well. So, I think they're both legitimate top 10 teams, and obviously they're coached at a very, very high level. And, we'll show up, we'll compete, we'll see what happens.
Anybody else, Mac, that you're looking at as we ask you to put your analyst hat on here for a second, other than those 2 that you think could be a force in the Big East this year?
Yeah. I think Providence has done a really good job in the portal. I know Ed is happy with some of the people he's brought in at Georgetown. But it's so hard to predict in the transfer portal era of who's going to be good and who's not. And frankly, John, that's made the non-conference portion of your scheduling a little tricky when it comes to trying to figure out what are the right bye games to play, because you just don't know. So, trying to predict how a conference is going to finish in this day and age is very, very difficult to do, because there's a lot of pieces. We have a lot of new pieces that are really talented, as does St. John's and UConn. But how are those pieces all going to fit together? You don't know that until you get closer to Christmas.
We're in an interesting time now in college athletics. You've obviously highlighted some of the major changes the last 5 years. And now we're hearing more and more when people talk about conferences, it's the Power Four and the Big East. Some coaches, some of your contemporaries, Rick Pitino, Mike Krzyzewski, have, verbally talked about the need for a league like the Big East to maybe merge with the ACC to have more of a power conference affiliation. This probably won't affect you over the next couple of years when you wrap up your coaching career, but I know how much you care about Creighton. Would it benefit the Big East long term to do something proactive like this in an effort to make sure that it's keeping up with the rest of college athletics?
Yeah, I mean, we've won 4 national championships in whatever the last decade. So I think what we have is very valuable, and it's a very strong product, and the leadership in our league has been terrific to keep us there. I think the presidents and athletic directors across the league have prioritized men's basketball to make sure that we're a player and have a seat at that table. So, I don't think college basketball is as good a product without the Big East. So, I think our value to the NCAA tournament and to television contracts and our television partners is very, very important. So, do we need to merge with someone? I don't know. And who knows what the future of it is, John. I'm, as a purist, I'm a little, I wish there was a way that this could be a little bit more regional conference play, because it's made it very difficult for fans to travel. How awesome would it be if we could play Iowa State and Iowa and Kansas State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, teams that are, really easy for our fans to get to and for their fans to get to us. And I just think that would be really, really cool. How it ever is able to happen, I have no idea. But, obviously the Big East is very, very strong. And I'm not surprised it's strong, because I know what goes into it. I know that the commitment that's being made on each campus across our league.
And you mentioned some of those, great programs that are in your geographic area, and, you've played them, you've beat them, you've had so many great wins during your tenure at Creighton. But I'm always fascinated by coaches, because in doing this now 20 years on the national level, coaches always remember difficult losses much more than their great wins. Why is that?
I think, we're all competitors, and it's just, it is amazing though, when you talk about that. And, players are exactly the opposite. Like,
Yeah.
I took a bunch of our former players out to eat at the Summer League last week in Vegas, and they talk about great wins,
Right.
and we punish ourselves over ones that we should have had that got away. But I think it's just the competitive juices in coaches. When you have a tough loss that comes down to the very end, you feel like that's a game you should have figured out a way to help your team win with the decision that you may or may not have made in the late stages of that game. So I think that's just the way coaches are wired, and it's it's what makes coaches, the good ones, very good.
Well, you had a loss like that a couple years ago against San Diego State in the Elite Eight, obviously on the final play that it came down to a single free throw. How often does Greg McDermott think about that game?
You think about it, I think about it, most of the time late in the season when it gets to Elite Eight, Final Four time, that, how close we were. And, but, you also don't want it to take away from a team that had a historic season that year. So there are some that are a little tougher to swallow than others. We lost to Marquette, 5 or 6 years ago with 0.8 seconds left in a 3-point game, and we had the ball and we found a way to lose in overtime. And those are the ones. And I have some boosters and some buddies that don't let me forget those either. So, the San Diego State one was certainly a tough one to swallow. We led a good portion of that game against a great team, and didn't quite get it done.
Well, I'm a positive person, so I want to keep people smiling, especially in July. If that's obviously a loss that you always carry with you, give me a win during your time at Creighton that always seems to maybe resonate a little bit deeper for Greg McDermott.
Well, there's been, there's been a few, but, probably, when we beat UConn when they were number one, that was the first time our program had ever beat a number one team. And, UConn did not lose after that game, and, stormed through the NCAA tournament. So, those kind of wins, but we had some great wins back in the Valley days. The year that Wichita State went to the Final Four, we beat them in the final game of the season to win the conference outright. And then we beat them in the finals of the conference tournament in two great, unbelievable games. So there have been some really good ones. We won at St. Joe's on a last second shot back when we were in the Valley. So you remember those games, and they're a lot of fun. And we just had so many good players here at Creighton, John. It's been a lot of fun to be part of.
All right, final thing, Mac. How does Creighton get back to being vintage Creighton in 25-26 and again find its way into the NCAA tournament with a chance to advance?
We were able to hang our hat on defense the last few years, probably at a level, that we weren't able to do prior to that. And Ryan Kalkbrenner certainly had a lot to do with that. So we're going to have to find an identity on that end that's different than what the last 4 or 5 years have been. And then offensively, obviously, we built this team. If you look at who we've added, we added a lot of guys that can score, and our ability to shoot the basketball and score some points is going to be really important. But this is the deepest team that we've had in quite some time. If we can stay healthy, and I really felt playing Auburn last year in the NCAA tournament. We were up 3 at halftime. I thought their depth really wore into us as the game went on, and kind of. Made a commitment to our staff that we have to find a way to even in this era to figure out a way to have more depth for that time of the year. So that's going to be an important part, and guys understanding their roles and accepting their roles and being champions in their roles is going to be really important to the success of this team.
Well, Mac, it's going to be a lot of fun to cover. As always, appreciate a couple minutes. Know how busy you are. Have a great rest of the summer, and as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
Always great to catch up, John. Thanks much, pal.
You guys, Creighton head coach Greg McDermott, the most normal coach in college basketball. I'm John Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.